next presentation highlights how 2 CII members successfully implemented CII Research in their projects. The presentation also offers a sneak peek into the updated online Deployment Toolbox for CII implementation champions, which addresses that gap between developing a vision for your organizational improvement and then successfully implementing that. That can be a real challenge, and so this presentation is going to help you see how that toolbox will help with that. Very excited to welcome Tammy Lynam from Burns and McDonnell, Sean Donde from Matrix Service Company, and Paul Burroughs from Ontario Power Generation. Folks, take it away.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. My name is Tammy Lynam. I'm the current chair of the Deployment Committee, and they don't quite have there's our slides. Okay, so today we will be briefly discussing why best practice implementation is important. We will share 2 best practice implementation success stories and end by letting you know a couple of ways that the Deployment Committee can help you with your deployment journey. Let's start with why is implementation important to you. CII's mission is to provide a research and development platform that creates and drives innovative solutions that tangibly improve business outcomes. For research to tangibly improve business outcomes, the findings need to be integrated within an organization's work processes. That requires deliberate effort within an organization to maximize the benefits received from their CII involvement. There are 17 identified best practices. A best practice is a process or method that, when used effectively, leads to enhanced project performance. Notice, implementation of CII Research is one of the best practices listed here in the top center. That is the best practice focused on by the Deployment Committee. We focus on helping members to achieve the benefits of successfully utilizing CII tools and benefiting from the results of CII's many research team findings. These are graphs from the best practices study. As you can see, both the owners on the left and the contractors on the right benefit from high best practice usage. Owners see a 7.5% decrease in cost growth, and contractors see a 12.2% decrease. Now I'm going to turn this over to Sean Donde to talk about Matrix Service Company's story.
Thanks, Tammy. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name's Sean Donde. I'm with Matrix Service Company. Today, I'm currently in a role within our Center of Excellence group. I'm a manager of organizational excellence. And today, I'm focused on building standard work processes across our functional groups, across all the enterprise. I'm also responsible for managing our continuous improvement projects. So today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my story of my journey to CI implementation. So my journey really starts about 5 years ago. So back then, I was in one of our subsidiary companies. We were in a kind of newly created business service group. We were really focused on standardizing a lot of our business practices within project execution, primarily focused on a lot of our EPC work. So I was kind of off and running, had started a few small projects, and then my boss came to me and said, hey, we got a new project we got to tackle. He wanted us to work in developing a phase gate system. So some of you might be familiar with that. It's kind of a system that a lot of EPC companies have, and it's really an ability to have a methodical approach to project evaluation throughout a project lifecycle. So if you can imagine having time throughout particular phases where you're kind of taking a pause, going through some kind of a review or phase gate assessment where you're just kind of peering into the project, kind of getting some visibility and an understanding of where the project's at. Are there any big uglies out there, any gaps or risks, things that we need to look at? and then produce a report that can kind of be elevated to leadership and management to just kind of have that understanding. So like a lot of big project initiatives, we formed a committee, started with, finding some subject matter experts, some stakeholders within our EPC world, and pulled that group together. A lot of those folks had come from companies where they had a phase gate system. So there was a good understanding and experience there about what was necessary to build a system like that. I think pretty early on, everybody recognized that, to build a robust system like that, you really need resources and people and time. And I don't think that was really available. So it was, hey, what's the quickest path to implementation? What's the path of least resistance? And so not wanting to really develop something totally from the ground up, the consensus was, hey, let's start with CII. Let's look at what kind of tools and research and solutions does CII have that we can kind of out of the box take and implement and make work for a system like that. So with that, they kind of just gave me my marching orders and said, go off and discover and bring us back solutions. So, being a kind of problem solver, I thought, well, I'll just put my head down and, I'll figure this out. And, that's kind of when I came to my first roadblock. So at the time, my exposure to CII was pretty limited. I'd say the most I knew about CII was maybe the acronym. I'm not even sure I had that right. So, trying to figure out how to get into the website and trying to discover things, that was right away, I had to solve that. We had an internal kind of committee of folks that were involved in CII, was able to get with an administrator, got access to the knowledge base. So, hey, perfect. Now I'm in the knowledge base. This should be easy. Wrong again. It's like drinking, water from a fire hose. If you've been in the knowledge base, there's just an enormous amount of material in there. These are publications and research from whatever, 30 years. So there's just a lot to consume and digest and figure out how to utilize. So that was a struggle. I was taking turns here and there, thinking I found something, wasn't quite right, back to the drawing board. So my next step was I just reached out to folks that were on the CII website that were kind of points of contact, found some folks that looked like they might be able to help me, emailed them. They were super helpful, pointing me in the right direction. A lot of times I picked the wrong person and they said, no, that's not me, it's somebody else. They got me pointing in the right direction. So that was another great kind of moment because I was able to get a little bit more focus on the knowledge base, find some of the things I was getting close to understanding and thinking could be a solution. And then next, I was invited to some educational webinars. So CII periodically produces or works with producing emails that for published webinars and training from a lot of their service providers. These folks put on hour-long, 2-hour-long kind of sessions just talking about different components of CII. And that was a pretty wide, eye-opening game changer for me. That's where I kind of learned about the first tool that I thought, hey, this might be something to use. And that was the PDRI, or Project Definition Rating Index. So this is probably the most well-known and widely used tool within CII. It's a front-end planning tool. It helps you review critical elements of scope definition, helps you identify gaps and risks and create action items. So right along the wheelhouse of my kind of marching orders to solutions to find. So I worked with the service provider to figure out, hey, what about training and implementation? What does that look like? And kind of came up with a plan for piloting it on projects, presented that to committee. Everybody gave me the thumbs up. Yeah, this is perfect, exactly what we need. Rolled it out and really kind of had a pretty quick adoption. And I think a lot of the teams either had been part of a PDRI before, so there was kind of, the traction was kind of, frankly, it was kind of easy. People really clung on to it quickly. And so, at that point, I was ready to, put the flag in the ground and claim victory. I didn't even get a chance to do that because everyone said, hey, that was great. What about pre-construction and construction phase? So, okay, so back to the drawing board. Now I'm going back to CII to see what I can find. And that's when I found construction readiness assessment and project health indicator. The first tool I really came across was construction readiness assessment. I was really fortunate at the time that this tool had just come out. It's another tool to identify functional areas where you can look through gaps, risks, and action items. And the project health indicator was very similar, something I could use during construction phase. And it kind of uses leading and lagging indicators to identify potential problems during project execution. So another perfect tool. So with that, I kind of had, some confidence, and we're kind of off and running. And from there, it was really about, hey, well, what's next? So we started pulling information for commissioning and startup, started looking at other best practices like risk analysis, advanced work packaging, and kind of recognizing that now that we kind of had this roadmap for understanding how to pull information out of CII, kind of evaluate, see how it best fits our needs, there was a way that we could continue that effort, not just build out a phase gate system, but look at other best practices and make recommendations for project execution in other areas. So, in the end, it was kind of it was an incredible learning experience for me. I mean, I think today, while this is kind of a winding path journey, if I hadn't done this exercise and I was starting over today, I think this path would probably be a little bit straighter, probably be a little bit shorter. Having the resources that are available now on the website on the CII website with the Deployment Toolbox, other implementation resources, the best practices guide, leaning on service providers, and really getting more involved in CII in things like the Deployment Committee. Just that exposure alone just provides more of that kind of power and information to help you move forward, being kind of like your own champion within your company to be able to do those kind of implementation efforts. So with that, next I'd like to introduce Paul, and he's going to talk to you about his experience with CII.
Thanks, Sean. Hi, I'm Paul Burroughs. I'm the Director of Renewable Generation Major Projects at Ontario Power Generation. Actually, I was just talking to the research team 384, hoping they can track my bags through Pearson Airport when I go home, but that's a big challenge. I'll just to put things in context, I'll give you a brief overview of my work with CII. I started in 2011 on a research team for interface management. It was an eye-opening experience, and I got to meet a lot of great people and take research through for 2 years from beginning to end. So that was, it really got me stoked for continuing to engage with CII and implement best practices. From there, I was named our Board of Advisors rep for OPG, and I moved into the Power Utilities Infrastructure Committee, Sector Committee, where we started that up basically from scratch. And I ended up as the vice chair there, and now I've moved on to the executive committee with CII. So that gives you a bit of context of what I've been up to over the past 11 or so years with CII. So we have a long history of engagement in the industry, particularly through CII, longer than my 11 years, that's for sure. So what did we do as an initial step? Well, it's really to gain an understanding of what CII has to offer. How do you do that? Well, we attended meetings. We attended such events as the annual conference, the Board of Advisors meeting, which are twice a year, sector committee events, including the Power Utilities Infrastructure sector, CII webinars, and also communities of business advancement. We also spent time analyzing CII's comprehensive knowledge base to look for material of interest to OPG and identified a few best practices where we could get some quick wins. CII's knowledge base is founded on years of research and experience and is readily accessible on the CII website. So if you have a problem to solve or a process to improve, that's a good first step in figuring it out and getting the material you need to leverage CII resources. So what did we do next? Well, we tried to structure our membership to get the most value out of it and to stay organized. And so we established some key roles. Myself on the Board of Advisors. We had Board of Advisors before, but as you know, things change and people move on, and so we reestablished that role. We also wrote a terms of reference for these roles to set expectations around who was doing what and when we would meet and things like that. The heavy lifter of the group, for sure, is the implementation champion. Randy McClarty, who's not here today, but she keeps us organized and drives value from our CII membership. This position is a must-have if you want to be successful. Communities of business advancement forums require less time commitment and travel than other roles, but provide people with industry contacts, the ability to gauge what's going on in that part of their industry, and influence the future of that area of our business. It's a great starting point for broader engagement of your company in CII, and also gives you some critical mass to your CII membership participation at your company. A more in-depth engagement with CII is participation on the research teams. Research teams are usually a two-year commitment, but lately we've been doing some research sprints of 6 months or less. OPG now has people on 2 to 4 research teams, typically at any given time, but it starts with one. Just pick a research team topic that really resonates with you and put someone on it or go yourself. And you'll get an in-depth knowledge of what CII has to offer really quick. Again, to keep structured, we maintain an organizational chart. You can see it lays out all who's doing what at OPG and CII. We have various representatives on committees, communities of business advancement, research teams. We're actively striving to improve our industry while bringing value back for OPG, so it is a two-way street. We expect our participants to be leaders at CII and OPG, driving value at both ends. The implementation champion, again, maintains the organizational chart and identifies areas for future OPG participation in discussion with our Board of Advisors representative, me. As new research opportunities arrive, our implementation champion will reach out to various areas of OPG to see if there's interest and value for people to join. So what's at the next level? Well, to keep organized again, we established an OPG CII participation committee facilitated by our implementation champion. The committee meets biannually to discuss recent advances across CII committees, CBAs, and research teams. We discuss if and how upcoming research, learnings, and best practices can be deployed to OPG. The forum is also an opportunity to provide feedback to our Board of Advisor representative to bring back to CII at the annual Board of Advisor meeting. Our implementation champion also publishes quite a neat monthly newsletter with a collection of industry news that includes recent CII publications and tools, upcoming webinars, and available training. The newsletter is curated to what is relevant for OPG. It keeps all our staff informed of key topics, information, as we stay in touch with our industry best practices. After nearly 30 years of membership, OPG has institutionalized many CII best practices in our programs, processes, and tools, as you can see from this list. To the right side of the slide is one of the covers for a guide. This is an example, a guide to project quality management, where we took information we gained from the Quality Metrics Research Team 313, the work we're doing with the Community of Business Advancement as well, and put it into a guide for use in our company. We're also now participating with the end-to-end quality management research team sprint to try to, and the outcome of that will probably be an update of this guide for our staff. We're also currently looking at several new implementation opportunities, including I2PD, which we're having a pilot at our Auto Holden station right now, but that looks to be a bright future for some of our larger projects. We'd like to get advanced work packaging installed from an owner's perspective, so how do we contract for that? And I will be calling up Sean to get the construction readiness assessment tool implemented at OPG, which is actually one of the beauties of our involvement with CII, is I can call Sean and get help with the implementation of that. And of course, expanding our focus of technology, information, and data analytics. Thank you very much.
So thank you both Paul and Sean for sharing your implementation journeys with us. So how can the Deployment Committee help you on your implementation journey? Well, we recently updated IR 166.3. This is the best practices guide. It has a chapter on each best practice that will summarize for you the value proposition of the best practice. and give you a self-assessment guide you can use to help determine how well your organization is doing at present. IR 166.3 is available to you through CII's knowledge base. Additionally, we've put together a deployment toolbox. It's available under the Resources tab on the CII website. So if you check out the Implementation Champion program, it contains a sample list of roles and responsibilities. That can help you to figure out who the right implementation champion might be for your organization. There's an implementation resource starter kit. That contains CII's research findings on implementation. There's an implementation roadmap and model that gives you a couple of references to help you get started with your implementation planning. And a sample organization org chart that shows you one way to organize your involvement. These are starting points for you. There is no one right way, no one right answer on how you should set up your resources, but you should set them up to make sure they match your business needs. So who are your implementation champions? Well, we want to know. So Board of Advisor members, be watching your email. The Deployment Committee will be sending you a survey asking for your implementation champion names. Now, why are we doing this? We want to connect with them and keep the conversation going regarding deployment successes and challenges. Lastly, come talk with us. We will be just outside of the Innovation Showcase near the CII booth at the break that's coming here in a few minutes, and then twice tomorrow. What you will find when you show up at our booth will basically be Deployment Committee members willing to talk to you about their successes and challenges and help you out if you've got challenges you're facing yourself. We're also going to have a couple QR codes. The first one's going to be for IR 166.3. Come and scan the QR code, and you can download it without having to navigate through the website, through the knowledge base to find it. It'll just be right there. And we'll also have a QR code for the Deployment Toolbox to allow you to go directly to it and bookmark it without having to navigate to it. All right, with that, I believe we're ready for questions.
So the first one is, if I were new to CII, where would I start my implementation journey?
So where I would start my implementation journey is I would start by, it depends. If you're somebody who wants to do the self-help method, I go to the Deployment Toolbox. I'd look there, I'd look at the research. If you're, however, somebody who would rather talk to somebody to figure out where to go and where to start, I'd call up the Deployment Committee because they're people passionate about implementation and deployment. That's who the Deployment Committee is. So, reach out to us. We'd love to talk.
Okay, great. The next one is, do you have any research regarding what it takes to successfully implement a new work process within an organization?
So CII has basically, there's 3 bodies of research, I guess you could say. The first one that I'm thinking of is Vision to Action, and I think it's like IS 31. It talks about how you take an idea and make it reality. Gives you some things to think about, some challenges that you will likely need to overcome, so it's a really good resource. The second one is implementation planning. It's 246. That one helps you to understand the different phases that have been successful for companies when they're going through an implementation. Things like making sure you start off with management support, that you've set up a pilot project. You're not just going and implementing it for your entire organization right off the bat. That you've got a good communication plan, a good training plan, different information like that. third one is from research team 166 that talks about the barriers to implementation. And that's where the best practices guide came from, because we all face very similar barriers. And so that helps you to identify what they are so that you can more easily navigate around them or over them or through them as you're doing your implementation.
Okay, thanks. This next one is for you gentlemen. How many deployment champions do you have at your companies? Is it a network? Like, do they talk to each other or just one person? And what do you recommend?
I'll take that one first. We have one. We have really one line of business. We have one enterprise project management office, so it makes sense to have one implementation champion who's driving efficiencies and best practices into our processes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we have a newly kind of formed, like I mentioned, a Center of Excellence group. I think within that group, we've identified kind of leaders to be part of our internal steering committee for CII to kind of focus how we're going to take CII publications, research tools, and implement them. So I'd say informally there's some implementation champions. I probably should self-admit that I'm one because that's kind of what I do. But yeah, I'd say we have a few.
Okay. All right, the next one is how you decide who fits the deployment champion role at your company. Is it based on position and the role in the company, or is it more about individual characteristics?
Well,
You go.
Well, I was going to mention, in the Deployment Toolbox, they just released, I think it's, I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's part of the Implementation Champion Network, and there's some guidance in there about exactly that, what kind of person it should be, and it's kind of some parameters for the, the kind of person it should be, but certainly someone's got a certain level of experience and exposure and influence to be able to modify what your practices are, right? You need somebody that can get into multiple aspects of your project execution and be able to say, hey, this is best practice, we need to change the way we do things. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty critical.
Makes a lot of sense. All right, next up, besides the approach of implementing CII developed best practices, do you recommend a strategy for organizational change management to be coupled with the implementation?
Yes. The biggest challenge with implementing anything new within an organization is the people and figuring out how to help them see the benefits of that change. So yes, having an organizational change management awareness and deliberately focusing on that as you're planning your implementation is important.
I would add to that too, that it's, part of that plan is kind of looking at your full spectrum of employees and making sure that you're covering that breadth from the frontline worker all the way through, that everybody's concerns are addressed based on their role and that they do understand what that impact is going to be and what the value is in those propositions for change.
For sure. Okay, thank you. Many of the CII research materials provide maturity assessments. Some industry members are most interested in data for benchmarking. Can CII future research put more focus on benchmarking?
I know with the new data analytics that there is a focus there on benchmarking. Okay. And the best practices study is something that from a deployment perspective has been hugely valuable to an implementation champion in helping us to show the value to our employees of that best practice and implementing it. So I guess, does that answer the question?
I think so.
I think with we are doing more of the implementation guides with each research topic, and it's really good to see sort of this is where you start and this is what good looks like and here's what best do. That maturity model is an excellent way to guide people down a path of development.
Okay, and whoever you are, if that didn't answer your question, you know where to find them during the break. Okay, next question. I think we have time for maybe one, maybe two more. It sounds like the CRA and health indicator tools overlap a bit. Is this true? And if yes, why would you do both?
So the construction readiness assessment, it really is focusing on pre-mobilization and construction. So if you can imagine, it's like 228 questions. It's really focused like, are you really ready to go mobilize to the site and ready to construct? And all the questions are weighted differently, so it gives you an indication. It's like, hey, do we pull the trigger next week or in a month? You know, in our company, we typically do them 120 days out and about 30 days out. PHI really focuses on indicators that happen throughout project execution in construction phase. So it's asking questions that are really qualitative in nature. It helps to get feedback from members of the project team on site to tell a story behind metrics. So it really helps, you know, shore up maybe the difference between what you see in a metric-driven reporting monthly document and what the story is behind it. And I think that's the kind of big difference.
Okay, thank you. That's all the time we have for questions. There were a couple that we didn't get to, so find them at the break.